I put together a little slideshow of some photos taken off the internet of Project C.U.R.E. This is our program, Doug Jackson's parents, and they're the ones that actually founded Project C.U.R.E. back in the early 90s, and Doug will talk a little more about the history of it. But I want to introduce Doug Jackson. He is our winner of the Service to Mankind Award a couple years ago, and then he went on and he won the Front Range District Award. He missed out of winning the national, but I think this is a good testament to what he has accomplished with his duties as CEO of Project C.U.R.E. So, Doug, and then I'll have Bob present the plaque and I'll get a picture of you together.
Margaret Mead was the renowned anthropologist who said, "Never underestimate the power of a small, dedicated group of individuals to change the world." Indeed, she said it is the only thing that ever has. And my message to you, my friends, today is a message of encouragement and of confidence that what you do matters. Your efforts to change the world work. And I can tell you that because we've had the experience of seeing what's happened all over the world because of a small dedicated group of individuals. And it is making a huge difference. Those are my folks. My dad and mom moved to Denver when I was 2 years old. We moved in a 1957 GMC pickup truck. And they had all of the stuff that they owned in the back of that truck. It was about the color of that young lady's shirt there, that kind of yellow color. And we drove from Boise, Idaho down to Denver, Colorado. My dad thought he had a job at the Nazarene Church, which at the time used to be over on Observatory Park at Milwaukee and Evans over there. The church still stands there, but the Nazarenes moved. They moved over to the Welshire neighborhood. You know where that big old church is right there. My dad thought he was going to be the minister of music at that church, and they gave his job away between Nampa and Denver. So he shows up with a 2-year-old little kid. I think he was like 22, 23 years old, and no job. And he started selling cars out the back alley of that church. And a guy shows up, you'll appreciate this. And he says, "I'd like to see the Pontiac you got." So my dad took him around the back alley of the church. And about that time, the guy pulled out a badge and he said, "We've been watching your advertisements in the Denver Post and the Rocky Mountain News, and you've sold 8 cars and you don't have a license. And in Colorado, that's illegal." And my dad looked at this guy and he says, "I'm 22 years old. You know, I buy a car, fix it up, sell it, and make a few dollars to feed my family. And I buy another car, fix it up, sell it." And he says, "What am I supposed to do?" And the guy says, "Well, you got to have a lot where you can put 3 cars. You need to have an office. The office has got to have a bathroom. You need a telephone on the desk. You need a file cabinet and a couple of other things." And my dad said, "Well, if I got all that stuff, could I have a car dealership?" The guy said, "Yeah, I suppose you can." So my dad started a little car dealership, didn't know what else to call it, so we called it the Denver Auto Mart. And that became one of the biggest car dealerships in Denver. This little part of town is special to me because of the time that we spent when I was here as a kid. My dad's place was right down there on Oxford. Renaud used to have it. Before that, it's across the street from the Ben and Jerry, Red and Jerry's, whatever that is. That porn shop used to be a Greek village inn where they made Greek food and served sheep's heads. The guy who invented the dune buggy used to have an office, a little factory about a block away from here, and we used to go down and smell that guy. You know, he'd been working with fiberglass that's got a distinctive odor. He had Volkswagens all over town with the tops off, and he was building these little dune buggies. My dad had a dune buggy that looked like a old Model T Ford. It had a tonneau cover on the back, and we used to drive that down to Bowles, before it was Bowles, back when the melting pot was the police station, and right there was a little dirt road. You could get off the dirt road and drive that dune buggy in the Platte River. Try doing that today. It was a fun time. My dad got to doing real estate. There wasn't enough money in cars, and his goal in his whole life was just to be a millionaire. And so somebody invited him up to a little place off of US 40 called Hideaway. And they started doing Hideaway. Problem is you can't sell a place in a town called Hideaway. Who wants to be in Hideaway? So they changed the name to Winter Park. And you guys know the rest of the story. My dad got really rich, and he moved from Oxford and Santa Fe down over here to a little community called New Inglewood. And you guys know now that was Cinderella City. The guy that built Cinderella City also built Lakeside, and he built Villa Italia, he built Bear Valley, he built Westlands. His name was Jerry Von Frelick. Here's the interesting story. My dad had the office right above the big fountain right in the middle of that mall. Do you know that today every brick of Jerry Von Frelick's legacy is bulldozed? There's not a single shopping mall that that man built that's still standing. Same with McNichols Arena. Same with Stapleton Airport. So what is it, gentlemen, that we want to talk about legacy? Never underestimate the power of a small, dedicated group of individuals to change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. It wasn't Jerry Von Frelick that changed the world. It wasn't those guys that built Denver International Airport that changed the world. So what do you do if you want to change the world? What do you do if you want to leave legacy? That was the question my dad was asking. He had all the money that he wanted. We went to church in a big Mercedes 600 car. It was gorgeous. Curtains in the back. He used to take me to school in a black Bentley. We had a place up in Winter Park. My dad and mom had this huge place up on Upper Bear Creek. My dad asked my mom one time, he said, when were you the most happiest? And she said, when we were living on the ranch out in Idaho and we had to save up nickels so that we could go down to Wheeler's Hamburgers on Friday night. He said, I think that was when I was most happy too. So they started a foundation and they gave all of that stuff away. That's legacy. My dad started doing economic consulting and that got him into the third world. He started in Zimbabwe. Then he went to Peru, went to Ecuador. And when he was in Brazil, his interpreter was a medical student. And she said, Jim, I'd like to take you sometime to this little clinic where my mom and I work. Lorena's mama was a doctor too. And they would go to this little favela clinic. You've seen this favelas out on the side of the hill where they just build these buildings out of cardboard and pallets. And there's about 300,000 people living in there. And there was this one little house that this guy had purchased. And in the front room of the house was an old metal exam table and a box of re-rolled bandages. And he was trying to do health care for about 300,000 people. And my dad walked in there and it just blew his mind. He'd never seen anything like that. And he asked the guy, he said, if I could help you, could you get the stuff in through customs? And the guy kind of looked at my pop and said, well, you're the fellow that works with the president. Maybe you can. And so my dad got an agreement signed by the president of Brazil to actually go ship stuff into Brazil without taking tariff and duty and without getting the stuff stopped up in the black market. And he came back to Denver, and there was another guy that had a place right down here on Oxford, and his name was Greg Lowe. And my dad was telling Greg and a bunch of friends at a table a lot like this about this doctor that he met in Brazil and how he had made a promise to this doctor to help him, and he didn't know what he was going to do to fulfill his promise. And Greg looked at my pop and he said, well, you know, Pete and I, we own a medical wholesale company. If you'll come down to my warehouse down here on Oxford and Santa Fe, he says, I'll give you some things. You know, you gave my dad $50,000 of brand new medical supplies. My dad got his old Dodge truck, drove it up the hill, put it in his garage. Greg started calling all of his buddies in the other medical wholesale companies in Denver, and they all started donating, and in 30 days they had filled my mom and dad's two-car garage up there in Evergreen full of medical supplies. And my folks paid to ship that down to Brazil in a container. Now, I do a lot of talking. I speak to Rotary. I was just in Rotary speaking to their big district conference just a couple weeks ago. I say containers. Those guys don't get it. They're not as smart as you all. They think a container is what you put your leftovers in after Friday night's dinner. They think a container is what you buy at Home Depot and you put your Christmas stuff in it and stick it in the attic. A container, my friends, is a semi-truck trailer. That's how we got started. 1987. We just closed our fiscal year in May, just a few days ago, May 31st. Anyone care to take a guess at how many semi-truck trailers we shipped just this last year alone?
41.
41 would be a lot, 1,100 I wish. 180. 180 semi-truck trailers. That's rolling one out every day but Friday, every week of the year. Isn't that amazing? Each one of those containers is worth about $500,000. Do the quick math. We shipped over $70 million of stuff this year. And here's the insane thing about this. The people who received this are all folks who work 12 hours and they make $1. About 7 years ago now, I went through a little what I call my domestic reorganization. Some of you guys have done this, right? I think, who was it, Henny Youngman, who said, next time just find a woman you hate and buy her a house. I moved downtown just because I could, and I moved into a little apartment next to Coors Field down there on Market and 21st. It used to be the old Piggly Wiggly. Now I live in the old bag factory. Did you know we had a burlap bag factory in Denver? So that's where I live now. I live in a warehouse. 2 blocks away is the rescue mission. We got a little problem in this town with those folks because we don't know what to do with it. But I'm not talking about those people. I'm talking about people who work harder than I've ever worked in my life, and they get paid $1. There's 1.2 billion with a B. That's like 4 United States in this world who work like that for $1. And when you get sick, you die. And I know there's a lot of complaining about the United States healthcare system. We got a problem with the VA. Some of you guys probably go over there. We got the best healthcare system in the world. I don't want to get sick in England. In fact, we've got such a good healthcare system in the United States that we throw this stuff in the garbage. Brand new gloves, needles, syringes, suture. All the stuff we need to keep these mommies alive all over the world, and we have it in such abundance that we waste it. And so all we're doing at Project C.U.R.E. is we're just driving around in big old trucks. Don drives them. And we go to hospitals, and we go to manufacturers, and we go to wholesalers. We pick up everything from those big hospital beds. You know what a new hospital bed costs now? 20 grand. Think about this, though. If you go over here to Furniture Row and you want to buy one of those beds that moves around, right? Tempur-Pedic with all of the you're paying $5 grand for that. And that's not a hospital bed. These things are amazing. What do you do with a used one? You throw it away. You crush them. Turn them into a Prius, right? That's what we do in this country. And we do it with everything. We do it with blue jeans. What did you do with that big fat monitor that used to sit on your desk for your computer when everybody decided we wanted to downsize and go with skinny monitors? We threw them away. What do you do with your cell phone? We don't recycle these things. We throw them away. Really? My dad still carries a flip phone. Amazing. It still works. He can text on it. He can answer it when he wants to. Which usually isn't very often. I'm like, Dad, I'm paying the bill anyway, just leave it on. He said, well, you know, I'm going to save some money. No, you're not. That's the society we live in, gentlemen. Ladies. And we can change the world. We worked in a lot of tough places this year. We shipped 29 semi-truck trailers into Nigeria. I was just over there in Lagos and in Abuja. Do you know there's 180 million people who live in Nigeria? That's half the size of the population of the United States. And the landmass of Nigeria is about the size of Texas and Oklahoma. It's the richest oil country in Africa. And they may actually have more oil in Nigeria than they have in Saudi Arabia. It's also the place that the north of that country is being torn apart by the same Islamic issues that we're seeing all over the world. That's where they took the little girls and they kidnapped them. The goal is to get them pregnant, because when you are pregnant with an Islamic man, that makes your kids Islamic, that makes you Islamic. That's what this is about. It's a religious war. And they're going in and they're burning these villages. And if you didn't think it was tough enough to stay alive on $1 a day before, when everything was going well, try that one on for size. So we've been up working in those refugee camps where they're taking these people who don't have another alternative, right? You talked about golf today. What do you buy at the front of a golf tournament to make sure you get a do-over? We call it a mulligan, right? There's no mulligans in the rest of the world, gents. There's not any. And when those people get sick like that, they die. And the insane thing is the stuff that we need to keep those people alive, we have so much of it. We throw it in the garbage. So we sent 29 containers into Nigeria last year. We're doing a lot of work in Ghana. We're doing work in Mexico. We just had a group of about 15 young professionals. These are kids from the age of 21 to 35. And I'm going to come back and talk to you about that, because I think that's got some relevance for my friends at Rotary, my friends at Kiwanis, for this club. They raised enough money to ship $500,000 worth of stuff to Campeche, Mexico. Now, Campeche is on the Yucatan Peninsula. If you flew into Cancun, drove down to Playa, and then went directly west, that's Campeche. Beautiful little town, colonial town. This is the thing that just blows my mind when I go to that part of Mexico. Do you know they had thriving cities of like hundreds of thousands of people 100 years before the Pilgrims showed up at Plymouth Rock? Unbelievable. The culture, the history. They had Mayans there for like 2,000 years before that, with huge cities. They think there's 35,000 undiscovered cities in the Yucatan Peninsula down into Guatemala. And the only reason we know that, right now they look like hills, right? They're flying over these things with this new technology, and they can see through the dirt, and they can see these pictures of these big old temples. This is the culture, and there's still a bunch of Mayans running around Mexico who need health care. The government is bankrupt. Did you know last year that there was more people murdered in Mexico than in any other place in the world except for Syria? More than Iraq, more than Afghanistan. It's all drug related. It has a lot to do with the heroin they're pumping into communities in places like Indianapolis, Indiana, Chicago, Illinois, not too far from my house over there at Colorado Boulevard in Montview. That's sort of drug central in this part of the country. Did you know that? And all of these people are just trying to eke out a living in that part of Mexico. And there's a group of about 15 kids in this country, in this town, who just said, that's not right, we're going to change that. And they did. They shipped $500,000 worth of stuff down there. And then they went down to Mexico to work with those people. They spent a whole day in an orphanage with those little kids, loving on those kids. They went to the hospital. The last day, on Memorial Day, when all of their friends are up here having parties and dressing up and doing all that kind of stuff that young people like to do, that I did when I was that age, they were down there working. And they went to the retirement home that's run by the state, and they cooked dinner, and they sat and they had dinner with those people. They got on the plane and they came home. That was their Memorial Day holiday. Never underestimate the power of a small, dedicated group of young kids from the ages of 21 to 35 from Denver, Colorado, to go to Mexico and change the world. I just watched it happen. We could go into a lot of other places around the world. The hot spot for ISIS right now seems to be Philippines. We've been doing a lot of work in Philippines. There's a huge Philippine community in Houston, Texas. And this lady named Erlinda, she got to worrying about this, and she said, you know what, my family's still there, and we need to help those people. And this one woman, who's probably, you never are supposed to ask, right? She's probably somewhere in her 60s or 70s. I'm not going to ask. She has become a force of nature. And she's got containers loaded. If Erlinda ever calls you and asks you for $10,000, guess what you're going to do? You're going to give her 10 grand. She is that strong. And we can go to the Philippines in the middle of a totally crazy president. This president just says, if I think you're a drug dealer, I'm going to shoot you myself. Really? This guy's nuts. She's in the middle of that, and the typhoons, and the cyclones, and all the problems that they've got. And now ISIS on top of that. And this one woman has decided in her community in Houston, Texas, to change the world. And she's doing it in a place like the Philippines. We've shipped a lot of stuff this year to Uganda, to Zambia. About 3 or 4 years ago, there was a group of 6 organizations that got together. One of them fell out. It was the government of Norway. They really wanted to work in Malawi. The government of the United States didn't, so we started working with the Norwegians in Malawi, and we stayed on with this other group. It was USAID and PEPFAR and all those guys as U.S. government. A guy named Naveen Rao, who was the head of Merck for Moms. A guy named Bert Peterson and ACOG, which is the Association of Obstetrics and Gynecology here in the United States. A former supermodel, Christy Turlington, who has a little project called Every Mother Counts, and Project C.U.R.E. And we sat down and we started looking at some of the places around the world, and in some of these communities, it's really tough to be a mom. The way you measure that is you measure the number of moms who die in childbirth, and in Denver that number is somewhere around 5 or 6 per 100,000. In the communities where we work, that number is 5 to 600 per 100,000. And all you need, for the most part, is a pair of sterile gloves and some suture to address about 80% of those issues. These are these moms who get into labor. The labor is obstructed for various and sundry reasons. Partly you can't get pregnant and have a baby if you're 13 years old. That's a really bad idea. Part of it is if you've been circumcised, female circumcision, all of that that's supposed to be flexible down there is scar tissue. They tear and they bleed to death. That's not a good situation. Part of it is that they won't go to the hospital. And you ask a young mom, you say, what we'd like you to do is to come to the hospital for a prenatal checkup, and she'll ask you the most logical question you've ever heard in your life, and that is, why would I go to the hospital? My mom died there. 2 of my sisters, 3 of my aunts, and all of my sisters died there. You want me to go there and die? Why would I go to the hospital? And you get to the hospital and you understand why. There's no supplies, there's no equipment, so the doctor left. What's he going to do? The doctor may have been educated in Europe. The doctor may have been educated here in the United States. Do you know that the number 2 place country where per capita Nigerian doctors is the United States of America? We're almost number 1. There's almost more Nigerian doctors in the U.S. than there is in Nigeria, right? Because they get educated here. Would you go back there if you were a carpenter and I said, you know what, we're going to go build an apartment building, but you can't use your hammer, nails, there's no screw gun. In fact, there's nothing, so get to busy. That's what these doctors have to work with. So you go to these hospitals, there's no doctors, the nurses are completely depressed, there's no supplies. Would you go to a hospital like that? I wouldn't. So we picked the 4 worst places to be a mom in Uganda, and the 4 worst places to be a mom in Zambia. And we set out on this mission, and the mission was, could we reduce maternal mortality by 50% in 5 years? And to a person, every other organization said no, impossible. Too many problems, too much resources. You got to battle all of these other internal issues. So the 5 of us, the United States government, Merck, ACOG, Christy Turlington, and Project C.U.R.E, we said we're going to address this issue. Do you know in 1 year, in the first year, we reduced maternal mortality by 30%. And we're 4 years on in the program, and we're over 50% in Uganda and coming up on 50% in Zambia. We got one more year. It went so well that we rolled that out in Nigeria. The power of a small, dedicated group of individuals to change the world. And it's working. It's working. Do you know last year we pulled almost 2.5 million people out of poverty around the world? They don't talk to you about that on the news. But all of these efforts, it's working. And these are people that aren't that different than you and I. They're not that different than our kids. I have this little rule in life: every community loves pizza. I've not met anybody who doesn't love pizza. Monday I had lunch with the guy who received the Time Magazine Man of the Year award because he was the doctor on the front line in Liberia on Ebola. He treated 857 people. You know what we had for lunch? Pizza. We're not that different. We really aren't that different. If companies want to just look at it from an enlightened self-interest point of view, if you really don't want everybody running up here from Honduras and El Salvador and Nicaragua and Mexico, help make their life down there better. They'll stay. I've talked to these folks. They'll go back. They just want to learn and live the same as you and I. And that's not a political statement. That's just the fact that we're people. And I understand all of the rest of the stuff, and you guys can come down wherever you want to on the political stuff. I hate politicians uniformly. just stay away from them. It just makes your life a whole lot better. Turn the TV off, right? And go do your work. In fact, I'll just share this. I don't know if this is on camera, so. We got a bunch of folks that work in my office. That's us. And I wouldn't tell you any different had I not seen it. 180 semi-truck trailers. I've been running this thing for 20 years. And I've gotten into communities where they were hopeless. I was watching people lay on the floor of ERs, watching moms die. When mom dies, the family goes to pot, really, and not the pot in Colorado. You got to save that mom if you want to keep that family together, and there's no reason for her to die. When the dad dies, life's over for the mom. Keep those families together, keep those parents healthy. You could build every stone into a school in Afghanistan, but if those little kids are sick, they ain't going to school. Buy every mommy in Africa a heifer cow. If she's sick, that cow doesn't give milk. It starts with health. And we got to help those people. Here's one of the great things on the horizon that I'm really encouraged about. I hear a lot of people talk about millennials and the difficulty that we're having with some of these folks. The average tenure in an organization for somebody under the age of 30 is about 18 months. So you do a big search for these employees and they leave you in a year and a half. That frustrates everybody. But I'm seeing a whole different side of this crew. I went to school in the 80s. I was a child of Gordon Gekko, right? My generation is not that philanthropic. We're just not. This young generation is. We've got kids coming out to volunteer at Project C.U.R.E. every day of the week. We've got them jumping on board like this group that just went to Campeche, Mexico. I've got another group just like that in Phoenix, Arizona. I've got another group like that in Chicago, Illinois. We've got kids calling and saying, can I come and just do a non-paid internship with you all summer? You know I'm not going to pay you. Yeah, I said non-paid internship. I just want to do something really cool. I want to reach out and change the world. And we're getting them lined up by the hundreds. This is a good thing, friends. They may not be motivated for the same reasons we are. They may not have the same politics we have. But they've got hearts that are saying, we want to change the world and we want to use different tools to do it. And I share that with you because, I've been a Rotarian for 20 whatever years, right? Rotary's got the same problem that we do in Sertoma, the same problem we do in Lyons, the same problem we do in Kiwanis. We're not getting the young kids joining our clubs. And one of the things that they don't want to do is take off an hour and a half out of lunch after a week to come have a lunch here. They just can't afford the time. They're under pressure. Do you know that Denver has the highest rent rate in the country outside of Boston and San Francisco? And these kids move here for lifestyle and then they can't afford to live here. And they're working a couple of jobs, right? They're down here doing stock trading at Merrill Lynch in the daytime and they're bartending at night just to make ends meet. To ask them to come and spend an hour with you guys here at lunch and to listen to a guy like me talk, not going to happen. They don't have the time. You know what they really like to do? They like to do volunteer activities in the evenings and on weekends. And what I challenged my Rotary friends in Las Vegas a couple weeks ago at their big district conference was, find some ways that people can get involved in things that matter to you and communicate with them in ways that matter to them. They speak a different language. My daughters don't want to talk to me on the phone. 14, 17, and 20. They'll text me. They don't want to call me. My staff, I say, did you call so-and-so? Well, I emailed him. Do you know that that phone actually works as a phone? If you put a number in, somebody will probably answer on the other end.
And you can.
You can talk to them. Right? I told him one day, I said, it's like me standing out in front of my apartment and saying, hey, come over for dinner. And then you come up to me later and say, how come we never get together? Well, I invited you to dinner. Really? We never closed the communication loop, right? So we got to figure out how to communicate. It's a new language. It's called technology. They do it really well in a whole different way than we do it. It's not that we do it wrong. We just aren't talking the same. You're speaking Spanish, you're speaking Swahili, and I'm trying to talk to you in English. And it's because I'm printing stuff. And they're doing it in pictures. Fascinating. But once we start learning to talk to these folks in a language they understand, we tap into what really matters to them, they're on board. They're on board. I watched these kids at this conference the other day that had gone over and studied in other places. And they came back and they were so excited because they know people and they Instagram and they Snapchat and they Facebook with these friends of theirs in Spain and Portugal and Japan and all these other places every day. Because they can. When I was a kid, we would have to save up for days, weeks of splitting wood up in Evergreen, Colorado so that I could make a long-distance phone call to somebody who lived in New York. Now it's not even long distance. And they're taking all of that stuff and they're applying it, and they care deeply. They've come through a situation where parents like me are divorced. They're really skeptical about church because they've seen church abuse people. They want to disintermediate. That means let's get rid of the middleman. I shouldn't have to go to the store to buy something. I can just get online and do it directly, right? Why is Amazon such a big deal? And until we can figure out as clubs, social clubs, how to serve that need, we're going to have a hard time, right? What is it that we can provide for them? They don't want to join a club to join a club. We are the middleman. They want to get involved and do something directly. So one of the things we do is we sponsor nights like volunteer nights at Project C.U.R.E, where you say, you know what, bring your grandkids, bring your kids. It's an easier sell to say, hey, let's go do this for 2 hours. It's a volunteer gig, and then we'll go to the View House and have a beer and eat a burger. And they do. They turn up, they show up, they do it. I am incredibly passionate about the work that clubs like Sertoma and all of our other friends around. We can't let this go, friends. We do too much good. You do too much good in this world. We've got to teach. We've got to help facilitate. We have to invite. We have to communicate. Because that's the group of people that are looking to us to leave a legacy. And they want to leave a legacy. They want to do some things to change their world, whether it's communication, peace, climate change, healthcare, agriculture. They're passionate, deeply passionate, and we're seeing it happen. So my encouragement to you today is continue with the legacy. It doesn't really matter if there's 30 guys sitting in this room and ladies, if there's 300, if there's 3,000, if there's 30,000. It starts with a dad and a mom in Evergreen, Colorado, who collect the stuff and put it in their garage. This year we'll have over 25,000 volunteers. Denver, Phoenix, Nashville, Houston, Chicago, Philly, 50,000 square foot warehouses rolling out semi-truck trailers every day but Friday. And it's going around the world and it's changing the world for people who are healthy and they're working and they're getting themselves out of poverty and they're changing the world. And at some point, that really is the ultimate answer, isn't it? Don't you want to get to a point where you say, hey, thanks, but you don't need us anymore? I tell all of my friends on the other side, that's my goal for you, that you run a successful hospital and you don't need me anymore. I'll move on. We'll have a big party and then we'll go someplace else, right? Every nonprofit, I'm not talking about colleges and universities and art museums, I'm talking about the rescue mission. Shouldn't we be putting ourselves out of business? Shouldn't Project C.U.R.E be putting ourselves out of business? If we're not addressing the issue. and you've got the power to do that. So thanks for letting me be with you again. This is great. I always love coming down. Don, thanks for all that you do at Project C.U.R.E. and for what you do for this club. And I just want to encourage you, continue the work, because the work's not over. You have a legacy to leave. You got a lot of hard work to do and some people to pull along with you. So thanks again. God bless in your quest.